We're coming upon one of my favorite times, and that's the Olympics. The Winter Olympics are coming up next month, and I love the Olympics. I don't care if it's the summertime or the wintertime. I'll take all the time that I can possibly spare and watch every moment of it. If I had the money and the time to do it, I'd fly over and watch the whole thing in person, and hope to do that at some point. But I got to watch a special yesterday, and they were interviewing a lot of the athletes that are coming up. And they were talking about the process of preparing for what's coming up and the training that they go through and the hardship that it is, but they have their eye on a prize. There was one girl, she's on the women's hockey team. And the U.S. women's hockey team hasn't won gold since 1998. So she was saying they've gotten second place the last two Olympics. And she said, people look at second place, a silver medal, and they say, you got a silver medal in the Olympics? And she said, yeah, but we had to lose to get that silver medal, and that still hurts. And so they're training extra hard because she wants the gold. They had other athletes that were talking about their training regimen and how every day they get up, and it's kind of daunting to go in there and to know as you're getting ready to start your training that in a few minutes your body is going to be in so much pain because you're beating yourself to become the best, because you're training for this goal you have. They have their eye on the prize. Everything they focus on, they say it's not about the year before the Olympics, and you're not just waiting a few months before to where you start setting your goals. They said it's from the end of the Olympics that happened in 2014, 365 days a year. Everything is focused on the next time you're going. You're training, you're working. Every moment is spent with your eye on the prize. This morning, we're going to look at two things that are the key to success. And these are keys to success not only in life, but in our Christianity. It'd be two keys. If you're not a Christian, guess what? The two things we're going to talk about would give you success at your job. It would give you success in your marriage and in your relationships and in the way that you deal with your children and with your family. And we'll just go ahead and say the end first. Here's what they are. Number one, if you're writing things down, first thing, the key to success is love sacrificially. And the second thing is don't quit. Love sacrificially. Let's get real about love. Love today is often portrayed, especially through Hollywood, as simply a feeling. People fall in love. You go to a movie and the whole movie, especially the romantic comedies and everything, and there's this idea that love just kind of falls on you, and then these people fall in love and they live happily ever after. I'm not married, obviously, but everyone who is married knows that after that honeymoon phase and everything, you wake up and love has to be a choice. The feeling, the emotion of love, maybe it's not always there. Sometimes you wake up next to that person and you don't exactly like them that day. But you make the choice to love, because love is more than just a feeling. It's more than just an emotion. It's more than just that high in the moment. It's more than the tingly part of dating someone. Love is waking up every day and saying, you know what, I choose you. Love is saying, a lot of people say, man, I would die for you. True love is saying, I would die by your hand and still choose you. And we live in a society where love is often portrayed as a contract instead of a covenant. We're in a contract. If one person doesn't please the other, then you can break the contract. You can get out of it. You have an out. Covenant love, true love that God calls us to, says it doesn't matter what you do. My choice is to give you love. I don't think we're honest about this enough. I think a lot of times we want to come in, and especially in a relationship with God. Have you ever done this? You're having a day where you're like, man, nothing's going right. Everything's going wrong. I'm really mad. And then you bow your head and you pray to God and you're like, dear God, thank you for this day and for all that you've done for me. And we straight up lie to God sometimes, because honestly, I've had those days where I'm not thankful, but then I catch myself and I'm praying that typecast prayer that we've kind of had beaten into us. And I think God desires us to be a little bit more honest with him. John 21, starting in verse 15. This is after Jesus has been resurrected. And he has, I'm not going to read this. I'm going to paraphrase it because I've got a lot to go through right now. But he has this conversation with Peter where he says, Peter, do you love me? And the word that he uses for love that he says to Peter is agape, which is a deeper love than what most of us are capable of doing. We know how to do. That's the kind of love, like I said, that says, I would die by your hand. And Peter says, Jesus, of course I love you. But the word he uses back is phileo, which is where, the word Philadelphia comes from. It's a brotherly love. He's like, man, I really like you, Jesus. And Jesus asks him again, Peter, do you agape love me? Would you die for me? And Peter says, God, Jesus, I really like you. I love you. You're a brother. I love you. I'm not sure I'd die for you yet. And the third time, Jesus says, Peter, do you phileo love me? And it breaks Peter's heart, and he's like, yeah, that's where I am. And in that moment, his relationship with Christ is genuine. It's real because he got real with God about where his love was. He was willing to be honest about it. And I think God validates that. And we say, God, this is where I am in my relationship with you. I'm not trying to romanticize this. I'm not going to lie to you about where I am. Guess what? Life kind of stinks right now, and sometimes I get mad at you about that. And we're like, oh, but we can't say that to God. Yeah, guess what? God's pretty big. He's got pretty broad shoulders, and sometimes it's okay for us to beat on his chest a little bit if we're upset about things. It's kind of like whenever your kids get mad at you. Have you ever told your kid no, and they look at you and they're like, I hate you, and they stomp off to their room? How many parents in here, whenever your kids say, I don't like you, or go, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing ever. No, come back here. You can have more time on the iPad. It's fine. Just be happy. No. You don't do that because good parents know that it's not always the thing that they need to do to give in to their kids every time. And they know that love is still there, regardless of whether the child is upset at the moment or not. God's the same way. He's big enough to take it whenever we throw a tantrum and a fit on him. So what should love look like in our own lives? Paul describes it pretty well in 1 Corinthians 13. If you've been to any wedding ever, you've heard this plenty of times. And when a lot of times we rush right on through this, we're going to spend a little time looking at what love is. He starts out that love is patient. There's a reason he starts with patience, because that's not something that's hardwired into us. We are a people of right now. We're a people of you get it right the first time. My granddad, God bless him, I love him to death, but if he goes to a restaurant and they mess his order up, I feel sorry for the people who are waiting on him because he will let them know pretty aggressively why they didn't do a very good job with what they were doing. And it's like, Papa, calm down. It's going to be all right. It's all going to be okay. But patience is more than just not flipping someone off who cuts you off in traffic. Because let's be honest, we want to do that sometimes. Being patient means you're patient with people one-on-one. That you take time with them where they are. You say, you know what, you're not as far along as I may think you should be. I'm going to love you right where you are. I'm going to walk with you through this. I'm going to bear this burden with you. Love is kind. I heard a quote, and it said, a guy said, Christianity is very good, but oftentimes it's not kind. Christians are oftentimes not kind. Kindness is more than just being nice to people. Kindness is doing what is in the best interest of the other person. Kindness sometimes is keeping your mouth shut. A lot of times people are like, oh, well, I'm just being honest. I'm telling it like it is. When really sometimes the most kind thing you can do is to just back off and let it be. Kindness is looking to the interest of others. Love does not envy. That's a big one. See, a lot of times we kind of get this skewed view of envy where, like, you see the guy driving in the Corvette and it's like, oh, man, that'd be nice. And you're like, oh, no, I'm not supposed to envy. I shouldn't want that. Yeah, it's okay to look at that and say, that's cool. That would be nice. Envy has its roots in anger. And envy is actually stronger than jealousy. Jealousy is saying, I want that desperately. Envy is saying, I want that. I'm mad that you have it, and I want that destroyed so that if I can't have it, nobody can. You see this in children a lot. My niece and nephew, oh my gosh, are terrible about this. One of them will get something, and if the other one doesn't like it, they would rather the thing be broken so that neither one of them has it, as opposed to one of them getting to enjoy it. And Paul's saying, that's not love. That's not how we treat others. That's not how the world sees love through us. We don't envy. Love doesn't boast. Now, there is a type of boasting that's okay. People are like, what? He says love does not boast. We boast in the Spirit of God. We boast in what God does. But we don't boast in ourselves, in what we've seen. A lot of times, again, this goes back to simply keeping your mouth shut. Not boasting means that whenever someone is telling you about something they've experienced and gone through that's really awesome, you don't try to one-up them. Because a lot of times people, oh man, you've all seen it. You've been around that person, maybe you've been that person, who as soon as someone opens their mouth and talks about an experience they've had, they've done something better. They've done something greater. They've done something cooler. Theirs is always the biggest and best and grandest. And it diminishes from the person who actually had something to say in the first place. And Paul says, let someone have their moment in the spotlight. Be confident enough in who you are in Christ to not always have to be the top dog in the conversation. This goes along with the next two. Love isn't arrogant and love isn't rude. Again, it doesn't put self first. It is sacrificial. That's what our first key to success is. Sacrificial love. It doesn't insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. Can you imagine a world where we actually did this? If we right here, just in this conversation, actually lived this way, what a transformation that would be. That would transform, starting here, this church, and it would radiate out, because guess what? You would show this in your jobs. You would show this in your relationships, and other people would see that you're different. They would see that you're not the same as the rest of the world. A lot of times it's easy to get caught up in, I want to just fit in. That's why we oftentimes, or I personally, will laugh at jokes that I shouldn't laugh at because I just want to fit in. And he's saying, no, you're not called to fit in. You're not called to be the same. You're called to stand out. You're called to be different. You're called to live and love in a way that reflects God, not man. And whenever people see that, they say, that guy's different. That guy is someone who has something I want. And that's whenever people start to see Christ through me. That's when people start to see Christ through you. That's why Jesus says, people will know you're Christians by the way that you go to church every Sunday. No. People will know that you're Christians by the fact that you've got a bumper sticker that says, Jesus is my co-pilot. No. People will know you're Christians by your love. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It is not resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoings, but rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. True love is saying, I love you to someone and being okay if they don't say it back. Because if you say, I love you to someone, and you're just waiting on them to say it back to you, guess what? You're not showing love to that person. You're showing selfishness because you want something in return. If you're willing to offer your love to someone and you might get rejected for it, you're actually showing the love of Christ. Because guess what? Jesus loved the world and the world hated him. The world crucified him. They put him up on a cross because he showed the love of the Father. And he says, I'm calling you to live that kind of a life. That's deep. That's hard. Love isn't just a feeling. Love isn't Hollywood by any stretch. Is there someone in the baptistry? If we have a mermaid pop out, I'm going to freak out, just so y'all know. Man, that totally derailed what I was saying. Love is deeper than I think we give it credit for. Just ignore that. It's fine. If it overflows, we'll figure it out. So under our second point, if we start to live this life of love, and it's a transformative love that people see what we're doing is different, then we can move on to the second thing, which is don't quit. Don't quit. A lot of people in Christianity, especially new Christians, they're like, I'm going to mess it up. What if I fall away from grace? Here's how you fall away from grace. Quit. Walk away from what God's given you. And God lets you. He's a gentleman. Remember the story of the rich young ruler? He comes to Jesus and he says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't murder. And the guy's like, I've done that. And he said, okay, sell all your possessions and come follow me. And he says that he walked away sad because he had much. And Jesus doesn't go after him. And a lot of people say, what? Jesus should have run after him and been like, hang on, let's talk through this. Let's get some counseling. Let's figure out how we can make this work. Jesus says, this is what you've got to do. And he leaves the ball in his court. And he does the same with us. He says, don't quit. Don't quit. Follow after me. Those athletes that I talked about at the beginning, guess what? When you wake up in the morning and your muscles are so sore from the day before, and you know that the training you're about to go do is going to be harder than what you did the day before, but you have your eye on the prize, they say, I'm not going to quit. There's a grit there. There's a determination that says, I'm going to press on to the goal. Guess what? This is a biblical principle that's just been applied to the world. The world, those people get it, and if they would put that in the context of Christianity, oh my gosh, they would be so powerful in the world. Hebrews 12, 1-3 says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you will not grow weary or faint-hearted. He says, Christ endured to the end. Do you know Jesus had an out? A lot of times we say, well, he was Jesus. He had to go to the cross. No, he didn't. Because you see, right after Jesus was baptized, where did he go? He went into the wilderness, and he was tempted by Satan. And if you notice, all the things that Satan tempted him with were ways that he could circumvent what he was about to have to go through, so that he wouldn't have to endure the things of the world. He said, turn these rocks into bread. Show people by your signs and your miracles that you're the Christ, and they'll love you because of what you can do. And Jesus says, man shall not live by bread alone. I'm going to walk through this. And he takes him up to the top of the temple, and he says, cast yourself off, because it's written. Satan knows the Bible, that they will not let your feet dash on the rocks. And Jesus says, we're not going to put God to the test. I will walk through this instead of testing God and what he said. I believe in his promises, but I don't have to see the result of them. And then he takes him and he says, look at all this world. Guess what? He pulls out and he says, I got the keys to all this. I have the keys to this, and if you'll just bow down to me right now, you don't have to go through what you know is coming. I'll just give you the keys to the world. If you just exalt me just a little bit above who you are. And that's when he says, depart from me, Satan. And guess what? 3 years later, after Christ was crucified on the cross, instead of having Satan hand the keys to him, he marched down, he kicked in the gates to hell, and he went down and he said, I paid for them. That world's mine now. It is no longer yours. Because he didn't give up. He endured to the end. Do you know Paul was a sports fan? We see this in several different passages. Like, he makes little hints to things, and if you use your context clues, you can see, I think Paul was a sports fan. In 1 Corinthians 9, 24-27, he says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control. They do it to receive a perishable wealth, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Paul knows running. He was a fan of track and field, and he knows boxing, okay? Sherry, he would have been right there with you. You know that. And he applies those to people in a way that they understand. He says, these people train. Guess what? Our athletes that are about to go compete down in South Korea, they're training. They get this. Again, biblical principles applied to the world. He says they don't do it aimlessly. They have their eye on the prize. They have an eye on a goal. They don't quit. There's an endurance there. We're called to endure regardless of what the world throws at us. But he says, you know what? They do it to receive a wreath on their head. And guess what? In 2 weeks, that wreath's going to dry up and it's not going to be worth anything. But he says the prize that we're striving for, it's worth it. It's worth it. What you're going through right now, yeah, it's bad. And God validates that. He knows the pain that you're going through. And it doesn't please God that you have to go through that, but he says, hold on. I'll walk with you. I can't take it away every time, but I'll walk with you. Let's get through this, because guess what? It's all going to be worth it. Paul knew that. He reiterated that to Timothy. In 2 Timothy 4, 7 and 8, give you a little context. Paul's in prison and he knows what's coming. He's entering the end of his life. He knows that he's going to be executed. And in light of that knowledge, here's what he says to Timothy. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Henceforth, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. What a great way to live. To approach the throne of God with that confidence that I've ran the race. I didn't quit. See, if we love sacrificially and we don't quit, guess what? You're going to win the prize. If in your marriage you will love sacrificially and you just won't quit, it will only get stronger. It will only get better. Your relationships will get better. In your job, if you live like this, God will bless that and there will be success there. It may not be the world's success. You may not end up with that promotion. You may not end up as a CEO or with more money, but people will see God through you. And in knowing this, we can walk away with the confidence of knowing that the best is yet to come.